Yeah, in under 1.5 hours' time at 4 p.m, Kieran, Cabinet will take place, but in a very different form to how it took place in Sydney last week when Peter Dutton was there, obviously with coronavirus, without anyone knowing. Some ministers are electing to join that Cabinet meeting by secure phone hookup from their electorates, including the Deputy Prime Minister, Michael McCormack, from Wagga. It has not been made mandatory by the PM for ministers to meet by the secure phone line, but the option has now been given to Cabinet ministers rather than come to Canberra and be in the Cabinet room. As one minister put it to me, if we're all in the same room and got it, that would be a problem for running the country. Just last Friday, Kieran, the PM was looking to shake New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian's hand, and did, at the COAG meeting in Sydney. Now politicians are keen not to be in the same room together. I guess it was a couple of hours after this we learned about Peter Dutton's diagnosis. We've already revealed this morning the House of Reps will see just 90 MPs next week instead of the 151 from both sides of Parliament travel to Canberra, and Scott Morrison and Anthony Albanese have agreed to 30 pairs. Question time to continue. Opposition saying they'll support the government's stimulus measures. We know that two members of Parliament, Peter Dutton and Susan McDonald, have already tested positive to the virus. The other thing likely to be discussed at Cabinet today is the dire straits that several industries find themselves in, and a package of several $1 billion in support now expected to be announced to save industries either later this week or early next week. That's just 1 week after a $17.6 billion stimulus package. Now, Finance Minister Matthias Cormann, he made it clear this morning that the government can't save every job or save every business. Let's have a listen to that.
We're very conscious that we are looking at things today, that many businesses will close and many Australians will lose their jobs. We'll need to provide the appropriate support to them through the transition, but also to ensure the maximum strength of recovery on the other side.
One of the industries that is right front and centre with all of this is the airline industry, and we saw a big announcement from Qantas in that regard today, Andrew.
Extraordinary, isn't it, Kieran? Like Qantas, 90% less overseas flights, 60% less domestic flights by the end of May. What that does to all that staff who work for Qantas and their budget bottom line, and if it goes on, which it may well, goodness me. So my understanding is part of the options on the table for these rescue packages is to cut the fees and taxes for the airline so that the government could look at stays on passenger movement charges, Air Service Australia fees, security charges, even aviation excise fuel tax. With normal passenger numbers, these are worth more than $1 billion a year to the budget. I believe there'll be moves on these taxes, and we can see moves on other fees and charges on business, but that's all being worked out. Expenditure Review Committee meeting before Cabinet, and as I said, announcements on that later this week and early next week.
The other big debate right now is on schools. I'll be speaking to the Education Minister, Dan Tehan, in about half an hour from now. Dan Tehan is my guest this afternoon. But the question is, will they or won't they be closed? There's still an argument not to do that.
They're being described to me as a standing item on the agenda of the Chief Medical Officer. So every day this is discussed, but at the moment the feeling very much is, Kieran, not to shut them at the moment. We saw Scott Morrison deliver a Facebook message last night to that effect. I'll be interested to hear what Dan Tehan has to say. I think we've got some interesting data here which might be playing into the government's decision on those who've contracted this virus. This is from yesterday, New South Wales Health. Have a look at that, who's actually getting it. Just 11 of 171 cases recorded in New South Wales involved 10 to 19-year-olds. You heard Greg Hunt a short time ago saying they hardly get symptoms. So it's showing that children have not got the vulnerability of picking up the virus that adults have, and their symptoms are not so bad. It's a vexed debate. But the advice from national and state chief medical officers is, keep kids should not be kept at home. They could infect more vulnerable grandparents. I want to take you to a statement yesterday from the Chief Health Officer of Victoria, Brett Sutton, who said the WHO-China joint mission noted the primary role of household transmission and observed that children tended to be infected by adults. So sounds almost, like the Prime Minister called it the other day counterintuitive, but sounds like less risk of being infected from home. I guess if this ban on public gatherings occurs, as we expect, that'll put pressure on the government to look more at schools. But it's interesting to note that today, Pymble Ladies College in Sydney, first major school to announce to its parents in New South Wales that it will move fully to online lessons from Thursday. They're saying students can still come to the campus, but they'll be learning online if they come to the campus. The reason they're putting that provision in place is obviously some parents can't just get childcare, but I wonder if this is a portent of things to come in coming weeks, Kieran.
Andrew, I want to bring up the map that we mentioned earlier this hour, just to recap for our viewers and get your thoughts on this as it pertains to the situation with social gatherings, because as you can see there, the big number is 210 New South Wales, also 94 Victoria. And when it comes to the social gathering restrictions, you've been hearing, and just to recap the report from earlier this hour, but your advice is that some states might go harder than others in terms of the restrictions.
Well, you look at those figures, undoubtedly New South Wales would be under pressure to go with, say, 50 instead of 100 in terms of the bans. And that's going to inconvenience a lot of people, a lot of pubs, clubs, restaurants, weddings. But you can see the exponential growth in New South Wales, and it seems more community transmission in New South Wales than other parts of the country. So there really is an argument to act harder there. And it seems to me Prime Minister Scott Morrison's pretty keen on this one. He's pretty keen to see an indoor gathering ban as well now.